Take back control. Stop letting algorithms decide your news. Get uncensored history and real knowledge to strengthen your mind, body, and spirit. Watch ad-free content now at iNeverKnewTV.com premium. I've heard you speak numerous times about black political power, right? Remaining
Oh yes.
limited even with support from white liberals. Can you
hmm
explain why that support hasn't translated into empowerment and what the real empowerment would look like?
I mean, brother, this is one of those questions that are always people's opinions, but let me at least provide some context and justification for my view of this. One of the things that I've been immensely impressed by, and I guess stained or struck by, is the way that Carmichael and Hamilton in Black Power stated that coalitions with people that have more money and political power than you will never yield to your interests, and the Democratic Party in the United States will not be the panacea, so to speak, of Black liberation and Black problems, for Black liberation and for Black problems. And the reason I think that's so important is because you recognize that most of the political systems and ideologies we've been fed post civil rights have very little to do with black empowerment and everything to do with white dependency, our dependency on white people. Now, if you take the view of intersectionality, intersectionality in itself is geared towards the idea that there should no longer be a black messiah and that black political power is best put in the hands of multiracial and multicultural coalitions on similar issues. Now, this is the same idea that white liberals pushed during the civil rights movement. It's a kind of view that at the end of his life, Martin Luther King became increasingly suspicious of, given the way that white liberal organizations and white liberals themselves were stalling black civil rights gains and civil rights efforts. It's something that was rejected by X early in his or towards the middle of his life. And it's something that was certainly rejected by critical race theorists like Derek Bell, etc. Uh, the asymmetrical power relations between whites and blacks in the United States means that even if black people are working with whites, they're at best third parties, right? They're never going to be at the core of how interest, politics, policies, and initiatives are being undertaken because they don't have the money or they don't pose a political threat to whites in such a way that white people don't have to do anything differently than what they conceptualize. Now, most people support this view because they say, listen, black people we've been trained to understand that black people are meant to ask white people to become better. Practically every theory in the US Academy that deals with American race relations is integrationist and based on that codependence relationship. And I start my classes with this. I ask them, when you're taught about black people, what are you taught? And they're saying, well, we're given things like epistemic injustice because we're trying to constantly make white people see black people differently. I was like, but how do black people see themselves? How do black people have a positive vision of themselves and materialize that into reality? What philosophy teaches you that? And to that question, there's never an answer. We don't know it. So when you ask the same question among, say, the black intellectual class or black politicians, and say, look, black people have a positive conceptualization of themselves as Americans who have resisted white supremacy, of Americans who have been against Western imperialism. How we of people who are truly about democracy in a world where whites can't seem to grasp the idea because they set up numerous systems and barriers to people's access to healthcare and clean water and food. How do we get to that? And no one has an answer because we've not developed black political theories over the last 40 or 50 years based on black people becoming empowered, controlling their own businesses, neighborhoods, and most importantly, the images and consciousness they have of themselves. We develop political theories on the basis that if we work better with white people, if we assimilate, if we're not threatening to them, that we can make advancements in our careers, that we have much more peaceful and enriched lives. And this is what I write about in my book. If we distance ourselves from those dirty Negroes that are suffering, being locked up, stopped by cops, etc., right? That is black progress. We see black political
Right.
progress as being separate from the people that are fundamentally suffering rather than being a part of that. So our political theories, right, haven't been geared towards us establishing empowerment the same way that we would say something like the feminist movement, where we talk about white women needing to be more CEOs, more politicians, more governors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. See, we teach those marginalized populations, like white women, control your image, control your institutions, control what people say about you, and if they don't, they're punished. We teach black people to be better pleaders, better beggars, better ways of asking and fitting in to white liberal theories in black liberal institutions. That's our mistake. And now that Trump's in power, right? Where are our liberal friends? See, we can't talk. There's no white people we can form coalitions with now,
Yeah.
because those coalitions are predicated on how white people are saying they experience fascism, not on how they experience racism. You see, when they were kicking black people out of the academy, when they were threatening black people's lives because they had opinions that didn't reflect well on America or its white supremacist heritage, that was just a black problem. That was just black scholars being attacked by the alt right. Nobody worried about fascism 5, 7, 10 years ago, even though the exact thing was happening. Now Trump gets into office, and Trump is doing the same thing to white academics and people who support Palestine that you saw being done to black people that supported black revolution, black freedom, black safety against cops, the disregard of black civil rights in a government that was being led or just come off the presidency of America's first black president. And that was fine. Those are just racist people. It's not a problem. Well, that was a sign of things to come. Because what as always, you see then that the racism that black people were experiencing as academics and politicians, where their lives were able to be threatened and their careers were able to be taken away for not holding a popular thought, if it offended liberals or it offended white conservatives. Now somehow that becomes the problem when in mass, this is how white people are experiencing Trump. You see, the problem is that black politics then, and this is the proof of it, black politics was never strong enough to protect its own people. And now that you have a certain groups of white liberals that are no longer in power, white liberals are having trouble protecting their own people, their own institutions, because the people that run these white liberal institutions are at their heart fundamentally conservative. So if black politics is being taught to gain favor with white liberals who have the power to make changes in liberal institutions, get you a job, get you resources to certain grants, help you start business, etc. Well, when those white liberals are no longer in power, black politics suddenly loses all its force because black politics was geared towards impressing and speaking nice in front of white liberals and not being able to rule or have a stake in the infrastructure and caliber production of a society that fundamentally doesn't believe that you should be equal, much less viewed as human. So what have we ran into with black politics? We've run into a dependency complex where white liberals no longer have power, and the white conservatives and right wing said we just don't love black folk that much to care about what you do. This is a white republic. This is going to become a white republic. It's time that you know that. So black politics is a mere shadow of itself. It's going to lead to black people either trying to wrap their interests or ideas up in white liberal stances against fascism. And I think you see this now with the black academic class using fascism more and more to talk about what Trump is doing, outside of, not outside of, but as wrapped up with issues of white supremacy and misogyny, et cetera. And you're going to see this kind of pitch where black people are going to try to become more advocates of a liberal ideology so they could beat back conservatism. And they're going to, at the end of it, they're going to say, well, this is a success for intersectional politics, when ultimately it's just going to be a success to get more white people, more white liberals back in power, and hope that they get benefits from supporting the people, the white regime that now gets to call itself president or dictate the institutions for the next few decades.
Listen to you talk, and I appreciate your explanation of black politics. Right? How would you define black culture? That's a big question now. A lot of
Oh
people
wow.
ask, like, what is black culture? And the way I observe it, there are
Hmm.
two types. You have white made black culture, and you have an
Yeah.
idea of black culture, right? How would you
Yeah.
define black culture, or is anyone able to define what black culture is in America?
Man, you ask me these difficult questions because I take your questions seriously. um, well, look, I mean, we start. There's always going to be a view of black people that black people hold themselves as fundamentally different than the white society. So the white society has a view of black people that's always been inferior, savage, wanting for certain things, not equal to the standard of white humanity that's been established by their institutions, philosophies, renderings, etc. When I think we look at Black culture, you know, I don't know what if we could say what it is because there's so many different variations of it, right? It has such variety. You know, I did an interview back in the day where I said that, you know, Black culture contains the cosmos of all creation, resistance, and origins for our people. It's that archive, that cosmic archive, that I think any group of people, be it historical, ancestral, or even contemporary, used to invent itself. And I mean, I think that's the best we can do. It has nothing but possibilities, but is so vast that it extends beyond the nothingness. And I know that seems kind of poetic, but it means that the symbols, that the logics that we use to make sense of reality are all part of our culture. So we in America specifically, we have a culture of resistance. So we see resistance in our dress, our food, our style, our commentary, etc. We're constantly in a mark for our preservation. So we see different ways that we pivot to try to maintain that. Community and family have been historically very important to us. And I think that's why you see our communities now having an internal criticism of whether or not some of these gender battles, I think what do they call it, the sex battle, it's not the battle of the sex, gender wars, that these gender wars are doing to Black men and women actually pairing up, right? How have young generations looked at this differently? This is why, I mean, when I look at social commentary, I see this huge problematization by the Black community of things like feminism and liberalism and all these other ideas. Black culture is a reflective element, and I think that we don't see Black people as being animated by that resistance heritage or the kind of cultural reason, or what I call in my word cultural logics, that other groups of people have. You know, when we see something happen to white people, right, like if they're French or if they're Spanish, etc., we believe that there's something culturally distinct about that group of people because they govern themselves, they have their own nation, etc.